Welcome to the feature-length podcast. No, I don't like it.
Okay. That's what everyone listening to our podcast says. No, I don't like it.
What is the feature-length podcast? Anyone?
The feature-length podcast is a show where three idiots talk about film and entertainment.
Good answer.
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, are you talking to us?
Yeah. I'm talking to the voices in my head.
Like, I truly don't know. It felt like a fever dream. I swear to God, I could not
It sounds so
make this shit
stupid
up.
hearing that.
If you're listening to this is a podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast, a podcast where we talk about movies and TV for a feature length of time. Welcome back to the feature-length podcast. I'm Karolina, and today with me are Dan.
Hello.
And Marco.
Hello.
As always. The three of us are here to talk about film and TV, but today, for the new year, we are doing our favorite, and I'm sure yours, the selection series, where the three of us pick some of our favorite films, and we talk about them. And I'm first today, and we are talking about Greta Gerwig's Little Women, which is the seventh film adaptation of Louisa May Alcott's 1868 novel of the same name. Little Women is, on the surface, a story of four sisters, Amy, Beth, Jo, and Meg, growing up in the 1800s in America. The story is loosely based on the life of the author and her family, and is actually an important look into the roles and ambitions of women at that time. The reason Greta Gerwig's retelling of the centuries-old story is so beloved to me, and my choice for this selection series, is that she chose to take facts from Louisa's life and career to reinterpret the story in a way that was more true to her initial vision, before the publisher pushed her to change certain aspects of the story to make it more palatable to readers at the time. And this allowed her to maybe not have the dream of every young woman to be a wife and mother before all else, as we'll get into more later. And not only is this version of Little Women great because of the unique interpretation of the story, but also because it features amazing performances by Florence Pugh, Saoirse Ronan, and Timothée Chalamet. And also Meryl Streep is in it, which is never a bad thing, in my opinion. So yeah, that's my selection for the selection series. And before today, Marco had recently-ish seen it, and Dan had never seen it. Mm-hmm. So we have some fun takes to discuss. So maybe we'll go into Dan's history first and thoughts, because you're the newest.
It'll be shorter. Yeah.
All right, sure.
So I watched it for the first time for this episode, despite there being 7 adaptations, you said? I'd never seen any of them. And yeah, I overall, I did really enjoy the movie. I liked all the performances. I liked the cast. I love Saoirse Ronan and like pretty much everything I've seen her in. It was nice to see Emma Watson in another thing besides Harry Potter. Florence Pugh obviously speaks for herself. I don't know who played Beth. I don't think I've ever seen her before, but she was good.
She was in Sharp Objects. I also don't even remember her name. Eliza Scanlon, I think, or something.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Anyway, and of course Laura Dern. It's always nice to see Laura Dern pop up. Meryl Streep, I thought she'd be in it more, but she was good for the part that she had. I was really looking forward to... This is a movie that for like probably the past year or so... I think it was probably around a year ago now that you mentioned you might choose this one for your next selection series, probably shortly after the previous selection episode. And I was like, oh, great, I've actually been meaning to watch that. I've just never gotten around to it. And then at some point I realized it was on Netflix, and I was like, okay, perfect. So that's going to be your next selection series. I'm looking forward to it. And I ultimately didn't get around to it until just before the episode, but it was good because it was...
Classic.
It was... Yeah, that is classic me, of course. It was great because like it was around Christmas, or it was just after Christmas before New Year's, and I was really in the mood for some like cottagecore, so this really hit the spot there. And I do have some issues that we'll talk about, but not to the point that I didn't like the movie. I did very much enjoy the movie, and yeah, I'll leave it there for now. But that was my short history with Little Women.
Nice. Prior to the year 2022, I had also never seen Little Women, much to the chagrin of everyone, because this is a very famous thing. I think a lot of my hesitance, despite the fact that my mother, sister, and girlfriend and Carol have all been all the family have been yelling at me to watch this forever and basically say how great it is and stuff. It's just that, like, in general, like, stuff set in this time period, which I will just refer to as the poofy clothes time period, doesn't really sit well with me usually, just because normally it's based on, like, classics, and classics have very different pacing. Yeah, for the audio listeners, which is all of you, Carol pointed at her book copy of Little Women that says classic. So, yeah, I find sometimes the pacing in those stories, when you're not reading it, when you're looking at an adaptation of it, to be a little difficult to get into, because most of those stories in novel form are more kind of like epics, and not epics like adventure epics, but I just mean in terms of their length and scope. And so adapting that into a very literal adaptation of a movie can be difficult, right? So I've always, like, had trouble with that subgenre. But recently, this past summer of 2022, my family was going to Stratford to see some plays for the festival. They were putting on a production of Little Women. So my first experience with the story of Little Women was that play, the production they put on, which was very, very good. And I enjoyed it so much, and I was so shocked by how, like, modern the narrative was in terms of a lot of the themes and the pacing of it and the twists and turns, and it really didn't feel like one of those poofy clothes movies. So, like, coming out of the play, literally that week, I was like, okay, Maddie, like, let's fucking watch the movie. Finally, like, you've been begging, let's watch the movie. So we got home from Stratford, and we watched the movie, and I also very much enjoyed this movie. Yeah, I think Greta Gerwig, awesome. So excited to see Barbie, and also Lady Bird was fantastic. Yeah, I think she's just phenomenal writer and director, so her taking on this material makes a lot of sense. And the whole cast is amazing. It also features, like, two cast members of sort of younger actors in Timothée Chalamet and Florence Pugh, who are two people that I wish I could hate, because they just seem so hateable with how, like, prevalent they are and how much people love them and worship them. But every time I see them in something, I'm like, yeah, no, I get it. Like, they are very talented. Like, undeniably talented, so I can't hate them for that. Yeah, so, like, exciting to see them act in this, as well as the whole rest of the cast, as you guys have said. Very, very awesome. Surprise, Saul Goodman is in this movie, too, which was very weird, but yeah, he's in this. But yeah, great. This is like a 99% movie for me, and we've talked about this before, Carol, but, like, after that rewatch, the first watch I did in the same week as the play, I came out with sort of, like, one main criticism, and that criticism kind of lingered, but I hadn't seen the movie yet. And then recently, before this podcast, I also did a rewatch around the Christmas time. It was the day before Christmas Eve, and we had a big snowstorm, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. And that was the day I rewatched it. Nice cozy afternoon rewatch. And I was really hoping that maybe getting some distance from the structure of the play, I would be more into the structure of the movie. But I actually found that I disliked the choice of structure even more on the second rewatch. Again, not enough for me not to recommend this movie and say this is a great movie. And also, and we'll get into the details of it later, like, not only do I understand the decision of the structure, but also, like, I think you can make an argument for the fact that the best technical version of this movie needs to have a structure like that. But I just think, based on my experience with the story being told chronologically, like 100% chronologically, I had a more enjoyable experience that way. So take that as you will, and we'll get into all the reasons why they may have changed the structure and the way it benefits the story. But I still feel like that is sort of the one thing that kind of holds me back from this being a, like, constant rewatch for me, is just that a lot of what I enjoyed about the story chronologically is a little bit lost in the current structure. But there are also benefits to the current structure, and we'll get into that. But yeah, this is a very strong recommend for me. I think anyone could enjoy this movie, even if you don't like poofy clothes movies, because I don't, and I like this movie, so there you go.
For some reason, I thought you loved poofy clothes movies.
No,
I've never actually had that discussion, but...
But just to be clear, like, I don't mind poofy clothes if it goes as far back as, like, medieval times. You know what I mean? Like, I love medieval times, I love ancient history, I like Shakespeare, but I'm just, like, the, like...
Victorian era?
Yeah, like, that, like, just slightly before the Industrial Revolution, like, just, like... That whole era of poofiness, Pride and Prejudice, like, I can't. But also, again, it's because I think a lot of those stories, and we talked about this when we talked about Pride and Prejudice, Carol, is like, it's paced and narratively told in a way that was dramatic and whatever for the time, but if you don't find ways to update that narratively, then it doesn't hold. But then, ironically, I think Little Women is... in and of itself intrinsically modern enough, but then in this movie they chose to change the structure, which we'll get into. But regardless, I don't know, that whole genre generally falls flat for me, but this one really doesn't. This one really works, which again, a lot of it is just to do with the theming and etc. and so forth. So
yeah, and so I guess now, because I didn't touch on it in my intro, I'll give my experience with it. So I read the novel of Little Women at some point in my youth. I already can't remember if it was like late elementary school or early high school, but regardless, like over a decade ago. So then when this movie was announced, and like the cast was released, probably like about a year before the film actually came out, I was really excited about it because I remembered reading the novel and liking it enough, and then like just seeing who was going to be in it was enough to get me excited. I was like, I don't even care, it could be a movie about anything and I would watch it with that cast. And it was also after Lady Bird, as we discussed, so I knew I trusted Greta Gerwig already, which, I mean, after one directorial debut maybe we should stop doing, as we learned after Olivia Wilde, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
But I think I was right with trusting Greta Gerwig. So then I saw this movie like when it came out, because it came out Christmas time 2019, and I was recently going through my Instagram stories, and I have a picture of me and my mom going to see it, Christmas 2019, so I saw it kind of right away, and sobbed my way through the whole film and had a lovely time, and then I probably just watch it once a year ever since, and before doing this, I like didn't really remember the novel and like how it was structured versus Greta Gerwig's version. Obviously I knew that like her version jumped time periods more than the novel itself did, but I didn't know like what was the same and what was changed. So researching it was really fun for me because now I know all the answers to that stuff.
Nice.
And it's really interesting. We'll talk about it more later. But yeah, I'm glad you guys watched it and generally enjoyed. And I don't know where to go from here.
Should we do just our like recommends and then we will get into the discussion?
Okay, so Marco, you already kind of touched on your recommends a little bit. Did you have anything you wanted to add, or are you done?
No, yeah. I mean, I think, like, I really do think anyone should give this movie a chance. Again, even if it's not, this subgenre isn't really your forte, I think this is a standout of that subgenre that anyone could get into. And if you like that subgenre, then this is the best one. So you will enjoy it regardless. My only slight, like, personalized thing would be, I think this is this is the best version of Little Women of the 7 you can choose from. But I don't know if going into this totally blind to the story of Little Women is the best way to first experience the story of Little Women, which Dan did, so we can discuss a little bit on the podcast, right? But if you have the opportunity to either read the book or maybe see a play or even just see one of the older movies for context, I think doing that first and then going to this movie, you would even maybe find some more things to appreciate about this movie, in terms of what it's doing differently and what it does well. And also just, I think this movie is very much designed to be the 7th or 8th adaptation of Little Women. Like, it knows what it is, and it's being that on purpose for people that have seen all the other adaptations of Little Women. So in that regard, I would say, yeah, you probably should have some context with the story. But, like, regardless, this is a strong recommend for me.
Me next?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with pretty much all of that, and what I'll add is, unfortunately, I do have to confirm what you said, that watching this one as the first one, it is a bit unfortunate because, not to the extent that I wouldn't recommend it. It's definitely worth a watch. But there were lots of times, which I'm sure we'll discuss, where I was a bit lost switching between the time periods. I had to rely on hairstyles a lot to realize like where in time I was. But we'll talk about that more after recommends. But I think you put it well, is that this movie is like a companion piece to either another adaptation or just the book itself, more so than standing alone. But that being said, my recommends would be A, if you're a fan of the novel or any of the other movies, obviously add this one to your watch list. B, if you're a fan of, as Marco affectionately calls it, poofy clothes era romances or dramas, because this is both, definitely check it out. I think anyone could like this movie, except maybe children might find it boring. But even
That's fair.
You were young when you read the book and you enjoyed it then, so
Yeah, and
it really depends on what your interests are. So maybe younger viewers would also enjoy it. But yeah, I don't think there's, other than that, I don't think there's a group that I wouldn't recommend this to. So
I don't know. I feel like maybe like a straight white man whose favorite film is Fast and Furious might not.
But that's what
enjoy
well, I mean, that's what I was saying though, is like, if you don't,
Yeah.
you would know if you like this
Yeah,
subgenre
yeah.
and if you don't.
Definitely.
Right?
I would just say, like, even for... Well, okay. Yeah.
Even for a
Do
Fast
you-
and Furious.
Yeah, do you like... Because you can be a Fast and Furious fan, but also, like, acknowledge that those movies are bad and, like, have good taste,
watch
but you're
them
just...
ironically?
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
I would
like
say...
me.
Sure. If you are... Yeah, like a straight white man that doesn't give a shit or whatever, but in the past you've enjoyed some other things that maybe are not Fast and Furious movies that are slightly a bit more like whatever, then yeah, you could get into this, I think. But I know what you mean. If you are truly just like, I see one movie a year and it's a Fast and Furious movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
if you're like out of touch with cinema.
yeah, exactly. If you're completely out of touch, yeah.
And I mean, also, obvious answer, if you're like a super misogynist person, you won't
Probably.
like this movie, but
Yeah.
I mean,
fuck you
based
anyway.
on title alone, I don't think they'd be
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah,
What were you
exactly.
expecting?
Yeah.
But I will say also, because I didn't touch on it, and I read the book as a kid, but I've never seen any other adaptation. And going into this, spoilers from here on out, the only things I remembered, because it had been like a decade, were that Beth dies and Meg gets married. That's all I remembered. So that was helpful in general. But yeah, everything else I was kind of going into blind or having like a foggy memory of.
Right.
And even like I did struggle a little bit with like some of the jumping back and forth, but I think like something that, because I also used to really love the poofy dress films and books and stuff, and I found that like a lot of them, like especially the Jane Austen-esque stuff, was very much like just one romantic relationship between one man and one woman, and that was kind of the focus of it. And that now, as like an older adult, I'm not old, but you know what I mean, I like that less. And I think the reason that Little Women is something I'm now liking more and more with age and upon every rewatch, honestly, is because it is like, yes, there are obviously romances, and that's discussed because it was the time period and the only way a woman could exist, but I like that. And I think the reason it is one of the more timeless and approachable classics is because the actual focus is like the family relationship.
Yeah.
And that's something that like anyone can be interested in, as opposed to just like a romance between one man and one woman. So yeah, if you're into just, I guess, family dramas, that also could be something that would make you want to watch this film. Obviously not a current family drama. It's still very of its time. They're not really fighting over cell phones or anything, but you know, still kind of relatable if you have siblings.
It's like a rom-drom.
Yeah, it's a rom-drom. That is what it is. I mean, it very much is a rom-drom. No, one of the things you touched on, Carol, in terms of like, a lot of the Jane Austen stuff, is it's so... You're supposed to spend the whole time rooting for this relationship, and then the relationship just like sort of happens, and then you just, that's it, and that's the whole story. But like one of the things that was so intriguing to me about this watching it for the first time that I wanted to see what the movie was doing was the idea that the whole like romance subplot is actually like an anti-romance subplot. Like it's a will they won't they, but you're rooting against it. You know what I mean? Like you never actually want them to be together because of like the everything that's set up with the characters and etc. So like all of that I think is really interesting. I think it's part of what makes this story, like you said, super approachable and modern in a lot of ways, even though it's an old story. But yeah, it's really like interesting.
So that brings up a question for me,
Mm-hmm.
And this ties to the book. So the whole aspect of this movie where like it starts with, oh my god, Joe, sorry, publishing her book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that an addition because of the real life story of how the book was published? Okay, that's very interesting. I thought, I didn't know if that was maybe part of the original story.
Yeah, so maybe now would be a good time for me to tell you about my research.
Yes,
okay.
And what is different between this book or this film and the novel and all the other versions of the films. So the novel itself is pretty like it is in order, like the play you saw, and I assume all the other films. It starts with them when it starts. Meg is 16, Joe is 15, Beth is 13, and Amy is 12. And the book is split up into 2 parts. The first part is in that same like youth zone. All of the like flashbacks that were in the film would be in part 1, and then part 2 was a 5-year jump.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, no, only 3 years.
Oh,
it's
okay.
a 3-year jump from part 1 to part 2. It starts off with Meg's wedding.
Okay.
So then the second part is Meg's wedding all the way to Joe getting married and inheriting the house with Frederick. And so in that version, like, yes, Joe is writing a book. I didn't actually fully reread the book, surprise, surprise, to find out if, like, they did the whole cheesy, like, the book she's writing is the book you're reading, ooh, or whatever.
The play did that, so I'm assuming that the book did.
Okay. But yeah, it doesn't really go into like the publisher telling her to change things or whatever, but she is like writing a book about her life, and that is true from beginning to end. And yeah, the only reason that the film had like a lot of scenes with the publisher and saying like what they wanted changed and what the audience might want is because, yeah, that was Greta's idea that every single adaptation has just been the same and just did like what the book did. And she believed, obviously we don't know for sure, but just like based on Louisa May Alcott's like journals and other like books and et cetera, we know that like she didn't necessarily always want all of her main heroines to just end up married. Like she also believed that in her own personal life, because Joe was loosely based on her, and she also had like 3 sisters, and I have information on who was who, not that it really matters, but yeah, so for her it was more important for her to like sell her art and be known for that than being married. And so obviously you would assume that if Joe was based on her and she could write the novel she wanted, she would also have that be Joe's end all, is to be successful over being loved by this man. So that's why Greta decided to do more of that jumping around and having the ending kind of be like is this what really happened, or is this just the happy ending that the publishers made her write?
Until you just said that, I thought this was biographical.
Well,
I thought like these people were real.
No,
they were all just based off people.
They're all loosely based off people. It's like a more ideal version of Louisa May Alcott's life, because like her actual family was more poor than the family in the novel. Like there were times where they like literally didn't have food to eat, like they were starving as a family.
Like that other family that they helped.
Yes,
much.
yeah, and like Louisa May Alcott's father was in the picture a lot more than the father in the like novel / film.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like the main differences, but otherwise like yeah, she had 3 other sisters. It was in the same like order. I don't know where I have it, but like.
And while you're looking for that, is that also why, I'm assuming that's why at the beginning of the movie she uses like a fake writer's name? I can't remember what name it is, but is it the real author's name? Do you guys remember?
I don't think remember thinking the same thing, but no, I don't think she actually.
Oh, okay.
It's
That
actually
was just
the real
something
author.
else.
Because she uses like a pseudonym or whatever, but I don't think it's actually.
That's
the
just
real
a
author's
writer's thing.
Yeah. Just
Doesn't she just do everything anonymously though?
I think there was a name. I mean, you guys have seen it more than me, but I think I remember there being.
I
a
thought
name
I
which-
remember there being. I do remember the anonymous thing, but I think at some point there's a name too.
At the end, she publishes it as Joe March.
Oh, she does publish it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well.
But anyway, in her real life, she had a married sister named Anna, who Meg is based on. The family beauty, apparently. There was Lizzie, her beloved sister, who was the model for Beth. And like Beth, she was quiet. And she did die tragically at 23 from the lingering effects of scarlet fever. So that was also based on her real life. And then her strong-willed sister is Amy, whose pretentious affections cause her occasional downfalls. So yeah, she had all the sisters and loosely based it, but just made it more fun.
Yeah.
And interesting.
Sorry, I just saw in your notes you always thought Beth was the youngest. Oops. I also thought
Yeah.
Beth was
I
the
also
youngest.
thought Beth was the youngest.
I think just because, like, I know they tried to make Florence Pugh look really young, but, like, she's still older than...
It's tough.
than
Yeah,
the youngest
she's definitely
one.
still
Like,
older.
she's not, like, 12 when it starts, obviously.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is the issue with trying to tell a story with one cast that
Across
spans 7 years from, like, actual childhood to young adulthood, because that's when you change, like, the most physically.
Yeah, no,
But
definitely.
You don't want two sets of actors either, so...
Especially if it's kid actors.
Yeah,
Fuck kid
literally.
actors.
Yeah, and I think that's one of my biggest problems with the choice to make it two different time periods is like we should be seeing ideally a big difference in like the appearance to help us know what time period we're in, but they're just all played by the same people, and there's not a whole lot different makeup wise besides like some, like I said, some hairstyling that I had to like sort of use as context to see what timeline I was in. And I actually think the editor in me was like, it could have been a kind of easy fix of like, if they had used, for example, hard cuts within the same timeline and crossfades to switch timelines.
Yeah, something
I think that would have been a big help a lot. Because there were many times, as much as I was enjoying the story, but then all of a sudden I was like, oh, why is this, like this thing that I saw happen 5 minutes ago apparently hasn't happened yet. And it just like, I don't know, it just, I felt like I was 2 minutes behind almost what was happening on screen. Not that I didn't get it in the end, but it was just a little bit of a detriment.
And I think that's to what we were saying about like this functioning as the best version, but as a companion piece, like as the seventh version or whatever.
And I think you already mentioned this, but I totally get after 7.
Yeah.
Or this is the 7th
Yeah.
movie. After 6 other adaptations, like you want to do something different.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I can totally understand why they went to a structural difference as one of their main ideas for like just making it stand out among the other ones. So yeah, it's not without reason, but I do think it is ironic that I think if it would have been like another tier better if it was kept in its linear form, because at least for me, like this is my first experience with the story, and just maybe it's on me. I should have gotten the story in one of the other million adaptations before watching the 2019 version, but
no, but that's the thing is that I mean that's the trade-off, right? Is like you know the like who you're making the movie for, and I think they ultimately made a decision to make a movie that is for people that like Little Women and make the best version of the movie that for people who like Little Women, which is a choice, and I think it results in a great movie, but it's just not it's not as approachable to someone that doesn't have familiarity. Although I want to give like some credit, because I do think the jumping doesn't work all the time. In terms of like even me that has seen this movie before, watching it this time, I was like, what the fuck? Oh, wait a minute, we jumped. But like I do want to give some credit to the fact that at least like they cared enough to try to do it artistically. It doesn't always work, but for example, the color palette in the two time periods is very different. So the color palette when it's in the flashback timeline is very warm, which makes sense because that's when they're all supposed to be younger and cozy times. And then the color palette in the future is way more blue and cold. But that's not always the easiest to be apparent. I think there's a really good example of it where the scene where Beth dies, because there's the previous scene where Joe comes running down the stairs or whatever, and it's like, oh, Beth's okay, and it immediately cuts to the exact same scene in the future where she died, which I have another problem with that, but we'll talk about that later. But I want to use this as a good example right now of, like, that was a really clear distinction, because you can really see the difference in color palette with it being the exact, like, a shot-for-shot remake of the same scene. But, like, then there are, just the more, we're just naturally cutting from one scene to another scene, and if you're not really paying attention to hairstyles and the color palette being different, like...
Or, like, the country you're in, for Amy's case.
But again, it's like, you're not... Yeah, I mean, that is a little bit more obvious, yeah definitely. But, yeah, like, it does require more work as an audience member. I appreciate the artistry of it, to be like, you're living in this story, we're not going to use title cards. But also, like... Okay, but then you have to acknowledge that you're making something that, again, is a bit more of a companion piece, or, like, you're going to be losing new viewers, and you're making something for the diehard fans with this one. Which is fine. Like, that's their prerogative after fucking a million movies that they've made or whatever. They can do whatever the hell they want. But, yeah. Speaking of the timelines, though, because we're talking about some of the technical aspects of the cutting, but I wanted, like... just say, I think my general structural issue with it, which is so much of what I enjoyed about the story and watching the story unfold in its chronological form was that there was a very modern sensibility to the twists and turns that everything took, and watching everything unfold in a chronological period really felt like... And it's because I'm rewatching the show right now, but a good example of it would be, like, watching, like, in Gilmore Girls, like, the characters grow up over time and, like, the different decisions they make and whatever. Like, watching it that way feels like watching multiple seasons of a TV show. And you're like, holy shit, like, we ended up here from where we were there type thing. And I think a lot of that progression and a lot of the smaller twists and turns are kind of lost in service of... shifting the focus a little bit to some other things, which I understand, and then also you're losing the twists and turns, but you're, like, setting up that the twist happened and being like, all right, well, how did we get there? Like, wait to see how we get from there to there, which for fans of the story is like, I can't wait to see this movie's adaptation of how we get from there to there. But for newcomers to the story, you lose, I think, some of that, like, some of the drive and the momentum in the story. And, like, I just wrote down a couple examples that stood out to me as just, like, weird choices, and just bringing them up I want to see, because Dan, you don't know what the story is like. Well, you do now know what the story is like chronologically, technically, because you've seen it all. I
could piece it together, but yeah.
But, yeah, like, one sec. Yeah, okay, so Beth's death, which is... in the chronological version of the story, supposed to be a twist on a twist. Like, she recovers, and then you spend a long time with them, and you're like, thank God the danger's gone, and then she fucking dies, and you're like, God damn it, she died, what the hell? Like, I just went through that emotional hurdle of her being okay. And again, in this movie, it's like, artistically, it works, and it makes sense, like, the parallel scenes of her coming down the staircase, and one time she's fine, and one time she's dead. I get it, but narratively, I thought it was way more enjoyable having that space in between to, like, let your guard down, and then she dies, and you're really impacted by it.
But I will say also, interestingly, there are a few, like, differences between the book and the movie that I haven't yet pointed out, but in the book, and that's also something I totally forgot, but in the book, after she got better, she was still, like, very clearly, like, weaker when we jumped 3 years forward, and, like, the whole family was worried about her because she was seeming, like, almost, like, depressed. Like, she stopped, like, talking to people and stuff, and it was because she could feel, like, how much weaker she was and how, like, how little energy she had and whatever. And so then when she got ill again due to the complications, it was, like, still surprising and still sad, but less of, like, a hard cut.
Yeah.
Greta
like, not completely
chose to show it. Yeah. And honestly, I mean, especially on this rewatch, when I was watching it to, like, write notes and discuss it, I was, like, really paying attention to where the cuts were and what was side by side. And so I found just, like, watching it that way really, like, kicked me in the gut. And how many times do I have to say it? I just watch things to make me feel something. So for that, I thought it was a great choice.
Well, that's the thing is, like, it does work really well. Like, that side-by-side, like, parallel showing what happened works really well. But then you even go to, they make reference to, like, the first scene in the movie, not the first scene, but, like, maybe the second or third scene is Florence Pugh in France, running into Timothée Chalamet, fucking Willy Wonka himself, is in France. And
he's looking really Willy Wonka.
He's very Willy Wonka in this movie. And in this scene, we give away 3 things that are twists. One, that Beth is dead.
No,
she's not.
It doesn't come up in the scene?
No, but she's not dead yet, right? When they run into
she's
each other.
sick.
Sorry, yes. She's sick. Okay, fair. That one doesn't give him away.
She's sick, but Amy doesn't know how sick.
Yes.
And neither does he, because he's been fucking around Europe.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, he's just fucking... but we learn that Beth is the one that gets chosen to go to Europe.
Amy, yes.
Sorry, yes.
Florence
There's so
Pugh.
many names. Florence Pugh. I'm just going to call them by their actors' names. Florence Pugh, the one that died, Saoirse Ronan, Emma Watson. No, but Florence Pugh got chosen to go to Europe, which is, again, like a twist, because the whole time you think that the grandmother is like this
Great
bitch.
aunt.
Yeah, whatever. Grandmother. All the same. Who fucking cares? And Meryl Streep, and when she picks her, it's like this like twist moment of like, holy shit, she picked her. So that is like, when that happens at the wedding later in the movie, you're like, yeah, I know. Like, I saw you in Europe a half hour ago. Like, you're already fucking there. But then also the fact that Timothy and Saoirse are not together is like, which again, not that this movie has to be a like, will they, won't they, but I think so much of the fun of the story is like rooting against them being together, and then when they don't end up together, it's very cathartic. Whereas in this, it's like, right away, you know they're not together. And I think they make that structural change so that way the big "we're not going to be together" speech can happen at the end of the second act, which I get, but also, yeah, I mean, you're completely playing your hand on that plot point, which, for people that haven't seen the story before, like, you're not getting that twist, whereas, yeah, for people that do understand the story, it's more like, oh yeah, classic, they're not together, I can't wait to see how this movie handles them not being together, which is a very different thing. So anyway, those were just like a few of the structural things that watching at this time, I was sort of like, I prefer experiencing that chronologically. I prefer the build-up in the fall, and then the twist that he ends up with Florence Pugh, and like how like shitty like all of that is and like feels in the moment when you're watching it. So yeah, I don't know. It's a choice made to focus on different things, and the things that it does focus on do work really well. But yeah, it changes the experience of like how you're taking in the narrative, like 100%. I think the chronological order has way more like narrative thrust, whereas this really is like a very cozy movie. You're just kind of like vibing with these people. Whereas, again, not a bad thing, but it's just that's the choice that they made. But yeah.
I agree. For me, I could live with all of the like premature reveals except for Beth's death. I think that would have benefited from a linear structure and that being like the finale of the movie, because like you said, I do like the flashback scene where she comes down the stairs and it's a fake out, she's not actually dead, and then we get the actual rushing down the stairs and she is dead. But then like 1 or 2 scenes later, like Beth is there again and she's alive, and it's just weird seeing her alive. It's a choice, but I think it just deflates the drama of like this crushing death that we just witnessed and they just witnessed, for the audience to once again just see her like it's like it hasn't happened yet, so it's like it nothing happened. But yeah, I didn't mind like you were talking about the reveal of, or it's not even a reveal, but the information at the beginning of the movie of Amy, like it's setting up Amy and Laurie as opposed to Joe and Laurie.
Yeah.
I kind of like that because it, for me, it made it more than just like a typical will they, won't they romance. The structure actually, I think, benefited in that case because it added a new element to a typical romance. But yeah, for me, what was in the back of my mind towards the end of the movie was like how much the death of Beth would have hit harder if it was like in the third act of the movie, and that was like the finale, and then that like broke Joe up and maybe even like drove her decision a little bit to. I mean, it did in the story as well, but it would have been more apparent, I think, if it was in that order, that helped to drive Joe's decision, her romantic decision in the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So
I do think, and I mean, we can get off talking about structure. There's so much other stuff to talk about. We've talked about this whole time. But I do think one of the interesting things, because you were talking about, like, Greta specifically wanted the whole, like, the framing of her talking to the editor about writing the story and stuff, that there's, like, a way to do it where you could have had the framing device be that, and maybe even play your hand at a lot of those, like, preemptive information dumps during the framing of it, but then still tell the story chronologically.
I was thinking about that too. Just like that is the one difference in timeline, and everything else is like a flashback.
Yeah, exactly. And you just lead back up to that moment, because then I feel like you're still doing the same thing of, yeah, we all know you've seen this story before, so yes, all this is going to happen, whatever. But then you just watch it unfold chronologically, so you still maintain some of the original, like, pacing.
Suspense.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, like, without it, the pacing is just, like, different, because the story was written to be a, like, somewhat epic over, like, a period of time, whereas this is kind of like, we're going to cherry pick moments in a way that we think is going to, like, provide context at the right times, which is just a different experience. But yeah, like, I do think the framing device choice is really good and neat. I just think it could have been, like, the only time difference, and everything is a flashback from the framing timeline would probably make sense. But
yeah, I will say, like, even as a person who was coming to the film with just the fuzzy details that I remembered from the book, I did find it interesting that, like, I don't know, I was almost watching it in a way that all of the jumping back and forth was almost like you found out what happened, sure, maybe early on, but then I found it interesting the order in which Greta chose to show us, like, the modern and the flashbacks to, like, inform people's decisions, because, like, we know right away that, yeah, Joe and Laurie aren't going to end up together, but then we see, like, all of this time where they do seem to be, like, flirty and into each other, but then how is he interacting with Beth in that way? And so, like, especially because, like, when I watched the film 2019, God, how old was I don't know, early 20s, and so just, like, in an early 20-year-old woman, all of that, like, confusion and back and forth, and, like, what motivates you to like someone romantically versus just platonically, and, like, all of that, I don't know, just really, like, hit for me. And so even though I knew kind of where the story was going, some things I totally forgot. Like, I don't even know if I remembered that Beth and Laurie got, not Beth, sorry, Amy and Laurie got, like, married. Like, I don't think I remembered that. And so just, like, almost knowing it from the beginning and being like, how did we end up here, was, like, not interesting mystery, but, like, a mystery that I was kind of excited to uncover via, like, everything else that happened in their lives now and before and whatever.
Well, that's the benefit of it. That's exactly why they did it. And that's what I was saying earlier. Like, I think, to make the argument that it makes the most airtight, like, version of the movie, it's like, you're probably correct in making that argument, is because, yeah, it does make it less about what's going to happen and more about, oh yeah, I don't remember exactly, like, what happened, show me, like tell me the story again of exactly how we get from here to here type thing, which I think does work really well. So I completely get the decision to do it.
But I will say two other, like, structural differences between book and movie that I also haven't pointed out, that, like, I don't even know what I think about them yet still, is in the book, not apparently, like, this is how it happened, I did the research, but in the book, Joe finds out that Laurie likes her because I guess he told Beth, or, like, Beth picked up on it, and so she brought it up to Joe, and then Joe freaked out about it and ran away to New York.
Okay.
While Laurie was in university, but, like, the proposal didn't happen. Like, Laurie was in university, he liked Joe, never told Joe, and Joe was like, this is freaky, I'm running away to New York, I don't like him that way, and I never can. And then when he gets back from university, he proposes to her. And then she says no, and he goes to Europe.
Okay.
So that was different. Interesting that Beth was involved. Because I find that, like, I haven't seen any of the other films, but I know that, like, depending on who played certain sisters, like, the focus kind of shifted on them more, because there were a few cases in which, like, really, really famous people played Beth or whatever.
Oh, that's
so then
interesting.
she was more central.
Yeah.
I can't comment on it further than that because I haven't watched any of them, but I just know, like, that was something I read about. And which was interesting. And also at the very end, you know how, like, Frederick comes to visit Joe and then the whole under the umbrella thing. But in the novel, he is for some reason in town, staying nearby Joe's house, and so they just go for walks every day for 2 weeks and then fall in love because, like, in the novel, they just had to end up together and it had to be motivated. So that was an interesting change, which I think, obviously, like, that one I know I like better in the film because then it makes sense that, like, it's definitely something Joe just had to write to please the publisher because it comes kind of out of nowhere. Considering that, like, yeah, sure, they worked together and there was some flirtation, but, like, he was here for a day and now she wants to marry him? Probably not. So I understand that change and I do respect it. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about the Laurie telling Beth changing the timeline thing. It was weird, but that's it. That's the only differences. We can stop talking about structure.
Okay. But so I have a new question then.
Okay.
This whole Frederick ending.
Yeah.
Is that supposed to be implied that either just that or maybe even the entire events of the movie are like maybe not exactly historically, I mean, it's not historically accurate. These weren't real
But in
people.
Context of the movie,
Yes,
it's not
in universe,
historically.
was this actually what happened, or is this just a, like, the book version with maybe some changes, and the whole Frederick thing was just added because the publisher wanted it, and she didn't actually do that? Do you guys have...
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. Something I was even thinking about is there's maybe even a way of looking at it where everything in the flashback timeline, the, like, warm and fuzzy colored graded timeline, could... Maybe that's meant to be a bit more, like, the in-universe novels version, whereas everything in the present, cold blue timeline is maybe, like, reality. Like, there's, like, that reading of it. I don't know. I think... Shrug. I don't know. There's no clues, like, either way. I think it's really, I hate to say it, up to your interpretation.
Because
yeah.
I just wish that one change I would make is that the whole Frederick thing didn't happen. I wish she did just, like, end up, like, not with a love interest by the end of the movie, let alone getting married. So that just kind of led me to believe, with the whole narrative in this movie of, like, a woman in a story shouldn't have to get married to exist in the story.
Yeah.
Maybe that was what that was, like, hinting towards. So I don't know. I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, well, because when I first saw this film and it ended, I was like, oh shit, it's just up to your interpretation. Like, I don't actually know if they're together or not. And so I, like, honestly didn't know either way. I was on your team, Dan, where I, like, would rather they weren't actually together. But I know, like, in the novel, like, they definitely were together. They had babies. There were spin-offs. Like, it's a whole thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But now that I've done the research and I know, like, why Greta Gerwig wrote it the way she did and how, like, yes, the actual ending, we see, like, the whole family at the house with all the grandchildren and, like, them celebrating Marmie's birthday. I think that is supposed to be, like, the final chapter of the book and not really what happened.
Right.
I think, like, Joe watching the printing press, like, finish her novel is supposed to be, like, the reality for Joe is she is satisfied with her novel. That's going to take off. She kept the copyright, thank God, and, like, that'll be her life.
Always keep the copyright.
Always
Yeah,
keep the copyright.
that's how I now interpret it, knowing, like, Greta Gerwig's motivations a little bit better. And how I will continue to interpret
Those
it. Those
scenes are, like, cut back and forth, right? Like,
Yeah.
from the novel being printed to... Okay, then yeah, that I guess that maybe is... That seems like a pretty reasonable answer for what the ending of the movie
Okay, I like
had
that.
interpreted. Yeah.
I like that better than it just actually happening.
Yeah, right? Because it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. I will
it's
say...
like the movie for the whole movie before that, it's like saying the opposite thing, and then just a sudden change at the
like,
end.
especially when Joe's like, I don't think I'm ever gonna get married. Like, I don't want Laurie to be correct and being like, no, Joe, you're gonna get married. Oh,
Yeah.
that's me.
Okay, one quick thing. This isn't even a criticism. It's just a weird detail I need to point out.
Okay.
It really bothered me that upon learning about Beth's death, Amy was going to travel back to America, but first she was going to get married.
Yeah.
Like, she was ready to go back, and then she meets up with Laurie, and they're like, you know what, that can wait. Let's get married first.
Yeah.
That was just a little bit weird to me.
I will say something that the novel makes explicit, which will make you feel better about it,
Okay.
is that Aunt March refused to let a girl travel across the sea unchaperoned, and you can't have a male chaperone that you're not married to. That's just highly inappropriate, and her health wasn't good enough to travel with her instead. So she didn't want to send her across the ocean with a stranger, but also it couldn't be a man she wasn't married to, so they got
Okay.
married.
Makes sense.
That does make more sense.
Yeah, I also found that in my research, and I was like, oh yeah, that does make sense, because it is like, oh yeah, we're both so sad.
Let's get married.
Yeah, let's just get married.
This is the perfect time to get married.
The optimal time to get married.
Yeah, that was weird.
I want to ask you guys now, shifting onto some more positive stuff about the movie. Do you guys have a preferred... Because this movie is very segmented. Do you have a preferred segment of the movie in terms of, like, pairings of characters and stuff? Because I will say, like, all the stuff with Florence and Timothy in France, I think is so good. But it's also, like, I think the writing there is very strong. And I also think, I mean, Florence and Timothy are just, like, such powerhouses, and seeing them act against each other. There's, like, the whole monologue Florence has about, like, being a woman and stuff, and, like, that's very good.
That was Meryl Streep's idea.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, that's great.
Because it was never in the book, but Meryl and Greta were talking, and she was like, I think it would really help, just, like, for the modern viewers who don't know anything, we just need to put in, like, a little sentence about why it's all about marriage and why she can't just be a happy little artist in France.
Yeah. No, that whole scene is phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's such a great scene. And then the scene after the quintessential... I have to ask you a question about this, actually, Carol, because you're the resident woman on this podcast.
Okay.
Can you explain to me the significance of why people on TikTok are obsessed with the word choice of Florence saying, Laurie, stop, you're being mean? Because I've seen about 10 billion TikToks being like, only women will understand why the word mean here was the perfect insult for this, as opposed to any other expletive or insult that she could have said. Please elaborate.
I have no fucking idea.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought. So it's basically just a bunch of people being fucking assholes and being like, actually, there's an inner club, and we all know what this means. And I was like, no,
Fake deep stuff.
Yeah, fake deep. Where I'm
Yeah.
like, he's being mean. She's saying he's being mean.
The weight of the word mean.
No, they're like, but specifically the word mean. I'm like, no, what are you talking about?
Maybe because, like, she's implying it in a way that, like, you know how much I care about you. You bringing this up right now in a maybe not so truthful way is really fucking asshole-ish. Like, don't play with me like that.
Sure.
Like, maybe it's like a fuckboy thing, and thankfully I don't think I've talked to a fuckboy ever, so maybe that's why I'm not a part of that club.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Anyway, that's another great scene between the two of them. Everything between the two of them is fantastic. That's my favorite stuff in the movie, is watching them interact. And seeing that entire section was like a modern rewrite by Greta Gerwig and maybe Meryl Streep as well, like if she wanted to. That makes a lot of sense why that is probably my favorite stuff. So
like Greta and Meryl had like that discussion around when they were filming those scenes. It was all filmed in Massachusetts, and by the way, like they never went to Europe or anything.
Yeah.
But then Greta was like, okay, I'm gonna write a little quick monologue about it, and like wrote it on a napkin right before they shot, and was like, here, Florence.
Yeah, and it's literally like the best written scene in the fucking movie. So
that's really cool, because that's like
that is
it's
cool.
so close to the heart of what the movie is saying.
No, it's
the
great
fact that it was like a last minute addition.
That's awesome. That's a cool fact.
But to answer your question, is my favorite part. Are we talking like our favorite characters, or from like a writing standpoint, what's the strongest in our opinion?
I mean, you can answer both. This is our podcast. Who gives a shit? Answer both. Do whatever you want, buddy. Either way.
My favorite character was definitely Joe, by far. I actually have to say, as good as like the writing was with Amy and Laurie, I did not like Amy. I felt like she was like the most spoiled of the sisters.
We put a pin in that. Let's talk about it. But continue with what you're saying.
And then I guess the other half of that question is like, who has the strongest writing? whose like subplot is the strongest. Yeah, I probably would also say Amy and Laurie, because there's a lot of time devoted to that, and it shows. So
Yeah.
But favorite answer, Joe. She's the coolest.
Joe's great.
Yeah, I will say, like, if I'm going to answer it in the way of, like, who/what I liked watching the best, and I think, like, my favorite scene is when Joe and Laurie first meet, and they're, like, dancing outside.
Yeah.
That is my favorite. So I think just, like, their camaraderie. Like, I will say, like, the writing wasn't the strongest, and it was a lot of just, like, Laurie looking at her yearningly as she was just, like, pushing him around like a buddy, which in general wasn't, like, interesting to watch, but I do just like their initial meeting and then some of their, like, just playful moments throughout, especially, like, obviously Joe and Laurie on the hill scene.
Oh yeah, no, that scene's fantastic. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a second favorite, but
Yeah,
it feels
that's...
totally different than the meeting, obviously.
Yeah.
You mean towards the end when they talk about their actual feelings towards each other?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she tells him to go fuck himself.
Mm-hmm.
She's very kind in that scene.
Yeah, she is.
Like, all things considered, she's very kind in that scene.
Yeah, no,
Well, she's
I
just
agree.
sharing her feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
And he is, like, invalidating them almost in a
Yeah.
way and being like, no, we can make it work. And she's like, but I don't like you.
It's not like she's insulting his character or
Yeah.
anything either. She's just saying, like, I
Like,
don't
it's
want
me.
to pursue a relationship with you in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
That's another thing I think that makes this feel, like, very modern and just like a good piece of writing is that whole thing does not devolve into some hatred bullshit.
Yeah.
It's very, like, adult.
But I will say then, like, Joe having to see Laurie marrying her youngest sister is also not awesome. Like, sure, like, their breakup didn't devolve into hatred, but I feel like, and I know, like, it was alluded to that there obviously were some, like, mixed feelings seeing that for her, because she was, like, just before saying she would marry him even though she doesn't love him, which, like, ouch. Oof, that scene. Okay, also maybe Joe and her mother is my favorite relationship to watch, because that's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
I also love that scene. One of my favorite lines in this whole movie is, like, I can't quote it verbatim, but they were talking about, like, do you love him? And she was like, she said something about the way she loves how he loves her,
Yeah.
and she's like, that's not the same as loving someone in the
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah. And
Love
she was
that
just saying
stuff.
Great.
maybe it's more important to be loved than love.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
Ooh, been there, done that, girly. But
But I think the decision to have Amy and Laurie together in the end, in real life, that would have been sketchy, obviously, seeing your sibling marry your old...
yeah, like
Love,
that
but-
could have ended in some hatred, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that, like, in fiction, in this case, it was cool to see, like, even though they were at odds in at the end of the second act there, by the end, he is part of the family, and they have an amicable relationship, even if it's not romantic, because they're just family and friends.
I also think that's a very, again, it's a fun twist in the story, but it's also, like, an interesting way to, like, confirm her resolution to the cause. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like she rejects him, and then, like, from a character standpoint, it's like now she's being tempted with the fact of, like, well, now he's fucking with this person, and, like, it's on her to sort of be like, yeah, like, I made that decision and I need to stick through with my conviction and, like, do what I thought was right and not be tempted by petty jealousy or whatever.
Well, that's the thing. I, like, totally understand it from Joe's side, but, like, my whole issue is, like, what the fuck is
Amy.
Laurie thinking?
Well,
Oh.
Laurie's a dick, but, like...
I mean, no, not he is kind of a dick, but I think, like, for him, the story's supposed to be more like when he thought he loved Joe, like, they were literal children. So it makes sense that he didn't actually know, like,
Sure.
like, maybe he didn't actually, like, love her as deeply as he thought, or, like, I mean, now, obviously, he says that, like, he actually loves Amy, and Joe was right about everything, whatever, but, like, I want to know what was going on in his mind, you know, the whole time, like, when you saw her again in Paris, like...
Yeah, I know what you
don't
mean.
know.
I mean,
I
I
don't
think...
get it. How do you make that switch from one of the
From-
older
from
sisters
sister
to the
to
youngest
sister?
sister? Yeah!
I think when I was watching it the first time, and I asked this to everyone that was with me, meaning Maddie and my sister and mother, and they were like, no. And I was like, okay. But, like, in my mind, I think there is a reading of it a very cynical reading of it, but this also isn't a very cynical story, so I think probably not. That, like, that Laurie is, like, doing it out of spite and doing it to, like, be closer to Joe. But, like, it's not really about him having feelings for her. And then also, and I want to get back to the idea of, like, Amy being the fucking worst, but, like, the fact that, like, these two plagues in Joe's side, for lack of a better term, like, end up together, I think there is, again, the cynical, like, view of that being, like, that it's all on purpose just to fuck with her type thing. Which I don't think is the case. At least I hope it's not the case, because that's very dumb.
It might have even been the case at first, but I don't think by the end. I think they are just genuinely two people that want to be together.
Yeah. I think so as well. Like, I think the movie does as good of a job as you can. Like you said, it's tough. Maybe if you had different actors or something, and you know, you could see, like, oh, these are literally different people now at this point. That would maybe help get the point across a little bit more that, yeah, like, he grew up and whatever, and he realized that, like, that wasn't actually romantic feelings, and he actually has romantic feelings. Whatever, like... But yeah, I think having it be the same actors, it makes it a little tougher to... Because then you do end up thinking about the cynicism of, like, man, this is kind of a dick move, eh? You know, like, it lingers a bit more. But yeah, I agree that I don't think by the end of it that's supposed to be the intention. I think it's supposed to be like a romantic, happy ending. Okay, so can we talk about Amy?
Sure.
You know? Yeah. Amy's the worst. I just want to say about, like, I as much as I love, like, the writing of those scenes and the performances and, like, Florence Pugh's performance and her and Timothy and stuff, she is the worst. And really interesting choice they made in the play was that the actress that played Amy the whole time was doing this unbearable, like, childish, like, whiny voice. And I was like...
Especially in the flashbacks.
Well, in the play... And I was like...
Oh, sorry, you're not talking about this.
Florence did as well, kind of, but the actress in the play was, like hamming it up. Like, full on, I am a, like, 6-year-old voice.
Okay.
Which was really frustrating. But then, and like, during intermission, I turned to Maddie and I was like, what the fuck? And she was like, no, you don't understand. Like, the point of it is that Amy is supposed to be, like, this annoying younger sister and whatever. And I was like, okay. And, like, yeah, that comes across, and by the end of the story, you get it, and everybody grows or whatever. But, man, when she throws the book or the play in the fire or whatever,
yeah,
just because she didn't get to go to the fucking movies,
or
whatever it was,
to the movies in the 1800s.
in my mind, when people leave their home, they're only going to the movies because that's all I leave my home for. But, like, yeah, I mean, that shit is just it's like she's the worst.
But I will say, like, when you see her as a child, and yeah, she is throwing these temper tantrums and wants to do everything her older sisters are doing and is just jealous, like, obviously that's annoying, yes. But she is a child, and children are fucking annoying.
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah.
Sorry,
definitely.
Children. And her burning her sister's book, I think, is unforgivable, but
As do
I do recognize that she probably didn't understand the severity of it while she was doing it. Not that it, makes up for anything. But maybe it's because I love Florence Pugh so much, and, like, as we mentioned, the good speech, but, like, when she was older, like, in Paris in the present day, I didn't, like, find her to be, like, annoying or evil, like, especially with the context of, like, her aunt telling her every single day that they're together that she is her family's only hope, the only way she's going to get money, like, the rest of her sisters are lost causes, and it's all up to her. Like, growing up as the youngest child with that immense pressure, and with, like, a sick sister, and with one sister already happily married, but poor as fuck, so she's, like, that marriage is useless by all intents and purposes in the day, and then Joe is just, like, going to be writing or whatever, like, She's
not going to be making any money. Writers don't make money.
Yeah,
that's
obviously.
They don't make money.
So, yeah, I don't know. So I think maybe, like, even this version of the film made me look at Amy with less judgment than I might have when I first read the book. Not that I remember it all.
Well, it's just, again, it's like, if you just had goddamn younger actors, like actual children, I would 100% be less, this person is annoying. But now
you're like, fuck Florence Pugh because she was annoying, like, a minute
No,
ago
exactly.
in a
and thankfully she's good enough of an actress that, like, the Europe stuff, like, it
ends
there's
up maturity
standing
there
on its
for
own,
sure.
But it's just, it is a tough, like, barrier for entry to watch this 26-year-old woman
Yeah.
pretending to be a like
12-year-old.
12-year-old mentally, and I'm like, God damn, please, I can't.
Yeah, there is that definite barrier, and if, like you said, if it was a younger actor, it would be more believable that I was seeing like a young person be a young person.
Yes.
Like they're, and especially the youngest of the four.
Yeah.
That makes so much more sense now, like knowing that Beth wasn't the youngest, that Amy's the youngest.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is the whole. I think the biggest problem is just the decision not to use different actors for the two timelines for the whole Amy spoiled situation. But
Yeah, definitely.
but yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously, by the time you jump forward in time, there's very apparent maturity in her character that she's not hateable like she was in the flashbacks, in my opinion. But it's just like seeing the flashbacks, and then it's very hard to, because we didn't spend those 6 years with her. It's like you have to take a second to realize, oh yeah, she's not that annoying little kid that she was 7 years ago or whatever.
No, exactly, yeah.
That's just why she's my least favorite of the four.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, that's...
I don't know. Meg just really bored me.
Is Meg Emma Watson?
Yeah.
She has the most boring plot.
Yeah,
Sure.
but she wasn't my least favorite person.
Like, as one of the sisters, I felt like she was like...
She was fine.
She was pulling her weight as a sister. You know what I mean? She wasn't a dead weight. No offense, Beth, but she wasn't a fucking dead weight.
Because Beth is dead?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Beth is dead. But yeah. And then Beth died, and she doesn't have too much to do.
Yeah, actually, one thing I also would have liked more is just spending more time with Beth so that the death hit even harder. It still hit hard, but I think maybe she could have used a bit more screen time.
So one of the things, I didn't write this down, I'm glad you brought this up though, that I thought worked really, really well, chronologically, sorry, we're talking about structure again, but that I think it addresses this, is the idea...
I wasn't talking about structure.
I know you
He
weren't,
is.
but I am. I'm bringing it back, baby. It's... Who's the guy again that, like, plays the piano and Beth plays the piano with him or something? Who's that guy?
Like Laurie's grandfather?
Yeah, Laurie's grandfather. I couldn't remember his exact relation to Laurie. But chronologically, like, at least in the play, like, that whole plot line is really, like, built up a little bit more. And so her death, you actually feel a lot through him. Like, it's really, like, you see his response to losing her, because they had such a, like, friendship.
Well, he sees her as his daughter.
Exactly. So, and I think that is a little bit lost in the movie. Although I get, if you're going to cut anything, like, yeah, that's the stuff you have to cut. I understand it, to make a 2-hour 15 movie and not have it be 3 hours long. But, yeah, that is something that definitely was more impactful, like, to see her death, like, through his reaction to it, as well as the whole family. But
well, it was interesting because they included a bit of that storyline with
like enough to still
over
include
and the
it.
slippers, and then like him not wanting to enter the house after her death. Like that was a nice moment, but yeah, it definitely could have held more emotional weight. But yeah, as you mentioned, just for time wise, because we are trying to talk about 4 lives of 4 sisters over 7 years, it's a lot.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
I would love the Gilmore Girls version of this.
Oh my god.
I would love 7 seasons written by Amy Sherman Palladino.
Well, 6 seasons.
6, and then someone else comes in to write the 7th season and fucks it up, and
Yeah.
then she's got to come back
Ideal.
20 years later. But yeah, no, I would love that. I think, actually, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you know, has this been mentioned on the Gilmore Guys podcast at all? But in watching this, I really felt like if it were to be brought up that Amy Sherman Palladino was like a big fan of Little Women, like, it would not surprise me. I'm not going to say it was an influence on her, but I just felt very like elements of her writing, in particular Gilmore, in this story.
Never came up.
Interesting.
Yep.
Because even like the ending is Gilmore Girls.
Spoilers.
Can you remind me again of the ending of Gilmore Girls?
Rory writes.
Yeah.
Okay. Say no more.
Yeah.
That's called Gilmore Girls.
Yeah. Yeah. That is.
That is exactly what happens in this. And then also though, I mean,
Points are made.
just in general, I felt like a lot of the family dynamics between like the sisters with each other, and then even with Marmee, like it reminded me a lot of Rory and Lorelai, and then let alone Aunt March and fucking Emily. Like that,
Yeah.
that all feels very Gilmore Girls-esque.
That's just generational relationships between women, I think. That's,
Yeah, no, sure.
That's
I
just
mean,
how she rolls.
Definitely. I wouldn't have been surprised if
Yeah.
it came up that, like, actually, she said in an interview that she really likes Little Women. I would be like, yeah, that makes perfect fucking sense.
Or,
because...
like, I stole the idea for my famous last 3 words, or, like, the plot line, or how it's all gonna end from Little Women.
No, exactly, yeah.
That would have been something to mention. But, yeah, no, not that I know of.
Okay, well, maybe...
Well, she must have read it. Who hasn't?
Well, you would imagine. I mean,
Yeah.
she is such a proponent of a lot of, like, feminist writers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, she talks about Nora Ephron a lot, I believe, so...
Yeah, I can't imagine her not having read Little Women.
Yeah, it would be shocking to me with a lot of the similarities as well, so...
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I did write down, this is the stupidest note I've ever written down in my
Okay.
life, but when the book was being published, I just wrote down, drop the, it's cleaner. I hate that I wrote that, but it's because the book was being published, and then it made me think of Gilmore Girls, where the book is also the ending, and then it made me think of Lorelai saying to Rory, drop the, it's cleaner, which, as we know, is my favorite moment in all of pop culture, so I,
Wait, was it going to be called The Little Women?
No, but it just
Oh,
because
okay.
it made me think of
Yeah.
Gilmore Girls, which was going to be called The
Oh.
Gilmore Girls, and then
So this is really far-fetched.
this is a Marco reach,
Okay.
yeah. But that's why I wrote that note down. And when I was scanning my notes earlier, it made me laugh really hard because I was like, "Why the fuck did I write this note down?"
I will say, now you made me read my notes, and there's one thing I don't like about this film. Just one.
We each have one thing.
Yeah. I don't really, like, get or enjoy the, like, straight-to-camera reading whenever there's letters.
Oh,
Like, people are writing letters to each other. It happens once with Frederick
Yes.
and once with Joe, and so they just, like, sit and, like, stare at the camera and, like, read whatever the letter contains. Yeah, I don't know. Like, just show me the little note or whatever. I don't know. Why? Like, you're already doing all this jumping back
Yeah,
and
I
forth
was
in
just
time,
gonna
so now
say.
you're adding, like, a third different thing.
No, I actually completely agree, and I thought this as well when I was watching it, was like, you have the framing device, and then you have these 2 plot lines that you're
Like,
jumping
you're already
between.
doing so much.
And then you also have this other visual interlude to read out letters. And also, again, it doesn't have... If it was like every other scene there was a letter being read...
It happens, like, twice.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't happen enough. It happens once, and then, like, an hour and 20 minutes later, it happens again. And I'm like, what the shit is happening? It's so weird. I completely agree. That is very out of place.
Yeah, it's like a third plane of existence
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we
it's
don't
too
know.
much.
Does this take place in any of the timelines, or is it just like, yeah?
Is this a dream?
Yeah.
It kind of felt like, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
At first, I thought it was going to be, when I saw the first one, I thought there was going to be a reverse shot of someone else talking back to them. So I thought that was just how they were filming the conversation, but it was just the one, and I was like, okay, that was there. And then it happened again, and I was like, all right.
All right, I guess we're doing this again.
Is this the response to the first one from like an hour ago?
Remember that one time I
Yeah.
stared directly at the camera?
I'm going to do it again. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my one dislike. My other note, one of them said, fuck you, Greta, because I, like...
Wow, that is very rude.
Lori and Joe on the hill, straight into Joe's speech. Fuck right off, Greta, is my
Yeah.
note, just because emotionally it killed me. Because, like, her just, yeah, like we jokingly mentioned, or I jokingly mentioned before, the whole, like, yeah, choosing someone who loves you over loving someone back. I was just, like, stabbed in the heart, but it's fine.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's fine.
I'm
fine.
not mad.
Don't worry.
I'm fine. It's all good. Did you know Emma Stone was supposed to be Meg?
So
Instead of Emma Watson?
Yes!
Because when you said that, I was like, she is Meg. And then I was like,
No.
no, wait. It's Emma Watson is Meg.
Yeah.
Huh, I didn't know that.
And just like how Emma Watson was supposed to be the lead in La La Land.
Oh.
Was she?
Yeah,
she
so
was.
for some
yeah.
reason, they keep almost getting the same roles. I personally don't think they're similar actors.
They're not at all. Not
I
at
don't
all.
get it. But yeah, I found that in my research, and I was like, that would have been a different movie. And I don't think Emma Stone would have made a good Meg in this script.
No.
Like the way she was written, unless they changed it a bit to fit Emma Stone's style,
Sensibilities, yeah.
a little bit more. But like as is, if you literally just had her reading current Meg's lines, I don't think I would have liked it. And like she's a great actor, like
Yeah.
she can do a lot. And like the only reason she didn't do it is because she had to promote The Favorite, which is, you know, another poofy poofy dress time
Goddamn poof
film.
movies.
Yeah.
Well, I think she's too charismatic for the role of Meg.
Right? As we were saying, like the most boring one, like Emma
Yeah.
Stone.
Yeah, I think, yeah. No, I agree. I think Emma Watson, this is going to sound like such a backhanded compliment, but I think her, like, her lack of, like, excessive outward charisma and charm and being very introspective and reserved, almost, like, small in her performance, like, I think really works for that character. I really can't imagine Emma Stone doing that at all, because that's just so against her type of, like, characters that she plays. But again, I mean, yeah, she's great. Like, she has a fucking Oscar. Like, she probably could have done it, but it's just weird to think about.
Of course, like, actors can have range. Like, I'm sure she would have been able to do it, but I think it was definitely better that they went with Emma Watson.
I think Emma Watson's the better fit. Yeah.
But interestingly, if Emma Stone was in it, then she would have been the only sister who was actually speaking in her natural accent, because everyone else is like British
Yes.
or
I was gonna say
Irish
that.
or the youngest, not youngest, sorry, Beth, the not
The dead
youngest, the dead one, is from like New Zealand or something. So everyone just had to
Everyone did very good
be
accents,
American.
Yeah, and I was gonna say,
I don't know why I did that, as if my accent isn't like
Yeah.
the same.
Be American.
I didn't have to change anything.
I was gonna say I've only seen I've seen Florence Pugh in this, Midsummer, and one other thing.
Black Widow.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I've never seen her in her natural accent. Like, she's always been putting on some
Yeah.
other accent. I always forget that she's British.
In The Wonder, doesn't she have her British accent in that, Carol? Did you watch
I
it?
didn't watch it, but she is British.
Okay.
I think.
The only reason I brought that up is because when Maddie and I watched it and it started, she was like, "Oh, she's doing a good British accent," and I was like, "No,
she
she's
is
British."
British.
And Maddie was like, "Oh yeah, she is British. What the fuck? I completely forgot." And I
I
was
don't
like,
know if
"Yeah."
she's using her British accent or if they wanted her to be like
I
more
think-
posh
yeah,
or
yeah,
less
yeah,
posh
yeah.
or something, but
I think it was a little bit like dialect-y because
Yeah.
again, that's another poof movie, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
yeah, it is on my list. I might download
No,
it for
don't.
the train.
I mean, you can. Somebody else watched it and loved it.
I'm still gonna watch it at some point because I would die for Florence Pugh. So don't,
Well, she's
don't
great.
try
Here's
to
what I'll
don't try
say.
to not get me to not watch it. You can't.
She is great. Just that's a film.
Yeah, I know.
That is a piece of
I
cinema.
know. I'm not expecting to be enthralled.
Okay.
One more thing about accents.
Okay.
I like whether it was intentional or not. There's like a slight twinge of Emma Watson's accent coming through a little bit. Maybe it was unintentional, maybe it was intentional, but I like that it kind of implies, I don't know the backstory, but that, like, this is 1800s America, which is not like the American accent that you hear in America today. So there's like the little reminder of like immigrants from like Europe and like
Yeah.
Ireland probably specifically, so you can, or just all of Britain, I guess. So you can kind of hear a little bit of that in some of the, well, specifically Meg's accent, but it makes sense that at least one of the siblings would sort of have a holdover maybe of the culture of, like, Britain.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, yeah, and
believe
even
it.
especially in the time where you're just trying to act like posher and
Yes.
richer than you are,
That too.
putting on
That
some kind
comes
of
through a little bit,
affected
yeah.
accent helps, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't be me, but you know.
Well, good thing we don't live in poof era.
Oh, thank God! I really can't do any accents.
I hate poofy clothing, so there we are.
Honestly, I think I could rock poofy clothing.
here's the-
I will
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
every time they put on one of those little, frocks, like a cape.
Yeah.
They never wore actual
Cloak.
coats. They just had little capes.
No, they're capes, yeah.
I don't know. I'd love a cape.
I'll say this.
I want a cape.
I've said a lot of shit about poofy stuff on this, but I actually don't mind the fashion of poofy clothing. It's just the
what
era
comes
that
with
it represents.
Yeah, well, of course.
But yeah,
I do still want to live in a world where I can vote and own my own money. Sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
But if we all just started wearing capes again, I'd be down for that 100%.
I would so wear a cape. I also wish it was more acceptable to wear suits every day.
Me too, Dan. I would wear. We should just buy suits and wear nothing but suits for the rest of our lives. Every podcast from now on, we have to wear a suit.
And those, I think Timothy Chalamet is wearing
Neil
those.
Patrick Harris from How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
You know, Neil Patrick Harris is a real person that exists without How I Met Your Mother.
His character only wears suits on How I Met Your Mother.
I would have
And
got
I don't
the
remember
reference.
his character's
Barney
name.
Stinson.
There we go.
I've
Yeah,
never
yeah.
seen that show. Never will. I saw one episode and I said I don't like this, and I'm never
wow.
gonna watch it.
It's
Anyway,
a hard stance.
what are those bands called that you put on your arms of your dress shirt so that they're not too poofy in the upper part?
Oh,
Even if you don't know what
I don't
they're
remember
called,
the
you
name.
know
I
what
know
I'm
what you're
talking
talking
about.
about. Yeah.
I wish we still embraced like those little details of
Yeah.
suits and stuff.
I agree.
I love that
I
stuff.
love old school like fashion stuff.
Yeah.
I find it very interesting, but it's a shame.
I wanted
Victorian
all of
era
Joe's
fashion.
clothes because hers were like less like girly.
Yeah.
I really liked everything she wore.
Well, we should. I mean, since we're talking about this and this is a movie podcast, the production design is very good in
It
this
is,
movie
yes.
all around. Like we danced around it, but yeah, this movie looks great. Like
Yeah.
it's very well put together.
For
Well,
sure.
I also like loved because I didn't know till I was researching that they didn't go to Europe to film any Europe stuff. They just went to like I think it was Harvard campus or something, Oxford, whatever the fuck's in
Whoa.
Massachusetts. I don't know. It's probably written here somewhere.
It would be Harvard,
Harvard.
but that's weird because they usually don't let people film there. so-
Just in like the garden scene with Amy and Laurie when she's like drawing him.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like talking about how she shouldn't marry Fred. That was in like a garden on the campus.
Oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
fun.
But anyway, I was gonna say, I found it really interesting because they apparently used one of the author, Louisa May Alcott's like family homes as Meg's home when she married John. Like that was real.
Okay,
Like they filmed
Cool.
at least the outside and stuff.
that's a nice
in
little
there.
piece of history.
Yeah, but they had to build like the actual like March home from scratch, obviously.
Yeah.
because that just didn't exist. But
They built that whole house for the movie?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
That is
Yeah.
very cool.
That's like Parasite. They built the whole mansion. For
Oh,
the
yeah.
movie. Also
Yeah.
2019.
yeah. 2019 was a great
year.
year for building houses just
For
for
movies.
movies. I wonder what they're doing now.
One quick question. So, is Frederick the guy that Joe marries or that Amy almost marries?
Joe marries.
Okay. 'Cause
Amy
I called
almost
that guy
marries
Frederick, I don't know
Fred.
So they're
Fred
both named
Vaughn.
Fred?
Yeah, well, one is Fred Vaughn and the other is Frederick. He's
He's French.
German.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was French too.
Yeah.
His accent sounded
Bad accent on that guy.
Yes,
No, but yeah,
correct.
that's fine.
Yeah, there were a bunch of notes about his accent actually. But
okay.
yeah, Frederick Baer is from Germany, and that's who Joe ends up with.
Okay.
I just want to. I'm wondering what. I see Spielberg there, and I just have to know what that was. About.
Yeah. So this was shot on 35mm film because of Spielberg.
Oh, this is
basically.
shot on film.
Yeah.
Like he told Greta Gerwig to do it? Is
Yeah,
that what you mean?
Because Greta called him up at one point and was like, "Hey, I'm kind of having issues with like lighting some stuff, like in the natural lighting. She didn't want to add a lot. Like, do you have any recommendations?" And for some reason, he was like, "Just do it on film." And she was like, "Okay." So she did it on film because of Spielberg.
That's
Cool.
All three of our connections for this series have a Spielberg
Yeah.
connection.
I noticed the one in yours.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk
What
about
do
it.
you mean?
Oh, we'll talk about it.
You don't remember
It's
the one of
not a-
mine?
It's not a huge deal, but
We'll
are we thinking of the same
discuss.
thing?
Yeah. We
Never
are
mind.
thinking of the same thing, but I
I'll
don't.
get there.
We talked
yeah.
about Carol. Okay, you know what? We'll talk
It
about it
was
when we
3
get
weeks ago.
there. Yeah, we'll talk about it when we get there.
Yeah, so I guess, do we have anything else we want to discuss, or should I drop in whatever fun facts I feel like dropping?
I think I've talked about everything that I
Yeah.
wanted to mention.
Hit us
so.
with the facts.
Okay, for some reason, one of the reviews of this film from The New Yorker, this guy Anthony Lane says, "It may just be the best film yet made by an American woman." I don't know why, like that.
The specificity.
Yeah, like no American woman has made a good movie before 2019 Greta Gerwig? Are we really saying that?
Like he's saying, this is the best thing that an American
Yeah.
woman could make. Yeah.
Like, has a British woman made something better? Like, similar? I don't know. It was just a weird...
I
Even
think
the fact that
that's
he just said woman at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a damned if you do compliment, because there's no way to make that compliment without
yeah.
like it being shitty in some way. So you should probably just not say something like
maybe
that.
he wanted to just make a point that like promoting this was
Yeah.
a film by a woman, but
I would think
the
so,
way it
but
was
that,
said,
that
yeah.
definitely came out very bad.
Yeah.
Definitely should have rethought that one.
Yeah. And we also mentioned Midsommar. And apparently Florence Pugh missed the initial rehearsals because she was finishing Midsommar. So she went straight from that to this. And she said this was like therapy
I
for
bet.
her after filming Midsommar.
Did they
which
come out-
makes
2019.
sense.
Same year?
Yeah.
Cool.
Big
It's a
year.
Good year for her, yeah.
What did you guys think of the score? We didn't touch on it, but I personally listen to it to read
Oh.
all the time, and I love it.
I liked it. I mean,
It's just like classical music.
Interesting.
I do enjoy classical music.
It was very non-intrusive. I don't really like...
that. Yeah, that's a perfect way of putting it.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't distracting. It was just sort of exactly what it needed to be for the poofy time area.
Yeah, exactly.
Era.
Good poofy time score.
And I will say, Greta Gerwig was pregnant when she filmed this and didn't tell anyone, and like submitted the rough cut and then gave birth like 2 days later, which like seems insane to me now as a person who has had to do a rough cut of something, even though it obviously the scale was much smaller. But doing that 9 months pregnant, I would die. I don't know how she did it. So just hands down, great job, Greta. She was 6 months pregnant, like by the time they finished shooting already.
Wow.
I don't know how no one noticed. I guess it was cold. Maybe they were in jackets. I don't know.
The poofy clothing.
The poofy clothing
Even
really
the crew
helped.
was wearing poofy clothing.
Everyone had to wear poofy clothing on set.
That was the rule.
Was she? Is this like? Is she with Noah Baumbach at this point? Okay.
Yeah. They've been together for like a while.
Oh, okay. I didn't know how recent.
Yeah,
that
and
was.
also like this film in general was in development hell forever.
Yeah.
And like the writer and director changed 100 times, and so she wasn't even assigned to it till August 2016 is when she was said to like be writing it, and then in August 2016 she was hired to write it. June 2018 she was announced as the director. And so it was only like then that it actually began to pick up steam and seemed like it was going to get made, which is really interesting. But she was begging the studio to hire her because she's like, I know I'm not on anyone's list to direct it, but like I really want to do it because the book inspired me to become a writer and director, which is really cute.
How many movies has she done now?
Like directing or acting or what?
Sorry, directing.
She's done a bunch.
I think just the two, right? Little Women and Lady Bird, and now Barbie? Or did she do anything before Lady Bird?
Like, I know she like wrote Frances Ha, but I don't think she directed it.
No,
she acted in it. I don't know
yeah.
how she could do that as her first thing ever. That would be insane. Let's see.
I do not believe she...
Oh, I don't have internet.
Okay, I will do it. No problem.
It's okay. It's
you guys,
it's not a big deal.
This is interesting. It's
but no,
good...
I think this was her second. Like in my research, that
so
came up, but I don't know if there's been anything since.
Greta Gerwig.
I know right now she's acting in White Noise, that new movie on Netflix with Adam Driver.
But this is a big movie for her, like second directorial outing.
Yeah.
To be given. That's impressive.
Well, it's because Lady Bird did so well. If you
but
think
was
about it,
was that like an indie movie? Technically?
Yes. Also, she directed something in 2008 called Nights and Weekends. So
is that a feature, though?
Oh, maybe not.
Probably like a short.
Oh, hour and 20 minutes.
Okay.
Oh.
So yeah, I guess it was a feature. But it might have been like a...
TV movie?
Like TV or super, like out of nowhere type thing.
Okay. Wicked. Yeah, that's all my notes.
Okay.
I feel happy that we got to talk about this for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I love my Little Women.
Good discussion. I had one other thing, which is just that I laughed at how fast the editor at the beginning of the movie was reading the pages.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know it's like, okay, like probably that's not literally happening in real time. We're probably speeding through him reading, because to watch someone read in real time would be fucking boring. But I just got to laugh out of it, because this guy was like speed reading. He's just like...
And crossing everything
Yeah,
out.
just crossing everything out, speed reading. I was like, okay.
Slamming it on the desk. Yeah.
Good times.
But yeah, this is a good time. Despite the like issues we did talk about, I did very much enjoy this movie. I want to make that clear. I don't feel it was clear enough. I had a good time with the movie.
It's one of those things where whenever a movie is like so good, but there's like the one thing that's not...
It does stand out more.
It stands out so much more.
I would be very interested to see a re-edit of this movie in linear, or even like you said, with just that framing device of the publishing house and everything else linear.
Me too.
That I would be very anxious to see.
Someone get a digital copy of this movie.
We need Topher Grace to take this
Yeah, Topher Grace!
and re-edit it.
Please, do the Topher Grace cut of Little Women.
I couldn't remember who it was that did that. For some reason, I was thinking it was Daniel Radcliffe. I was going to make the exact same joke, but then I was like, fuck, I don't know who it is. I can't. I'm really
Daniel
glad
Radcliffe
did.
also seems like the type
he would.
to be able to do that.
I just watched Weird, which is why he's front of mind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is it good? I've heard it's funny.
It was hilarious. But it is just like a
Weird
2-hour long Funny or Die like YouTube video. So.
Yeah. Well, because I've heard it's like straight up a parody of biopic movies. So it's not even like his actual
it's like
life story.
It's insane.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Well, that's good
It's
then.
so
I appreciate that.
definitely.
That's fucking hilarious.
Madonna plays a major role.
Oh.
Not like actual Madonna, like the character
Yeah,
of
the
Madonna.
character of Madonna.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to watching it one day.
Yeah, but I'm just glad you both watched Little Women finally, so I can stop bothering you about it.
It's good. It's worthwhile.
Long past due. I know.
I know.
The best poofy movie of all time.
Yeah? I don't know how many other poofy movies I've seen, actually, now that you mention it. I've never seen Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, thank God.
Is that what you're going to ask?
Yeah, that is what I was going to ask.
Emma? Sense and Sensibility. Those are all poofy movies. There was just an Emma with Anya Taylor-Joy. That's why I asked.
I've never heard of it.
I've actually never heard of Emma either. I know Sense and Sensibility, but I have no idea what Emma is.
Okay, well, we'll have a poofy movie episode one day.
Oh God, that'll be I'll be sick for that episode. I'm calling it sick.
If we could do like 10 episodes on Batman versus Superman and all that bullshit, we can do one poofy movie episode.
That is fair. Poofy movies.
Thanks again for listening to the Feature Length Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to us if you liked this video or audio. Give us a rating and review. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes of this podcast, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the bell to be notified when we post a new video, or follow the podcast on Spotify. If you want to connect with us directly, you can follow us on Instagram at featurelengthpodcast, or even send us an email at featurelengthpodcast@gmail.com. Catch you on the flip side.